In a recent video, I broke down the dismissive avoidant attachment style and what it takes to get an ex back who falls into that category. In today's video, I want to take the opposite approach. I want to look at the fearful avoidant attachment style person and what it takes to get them to want to come back to you. So let's dive into it. Hi, I'm Jeff Campbell from DivorcedParentsClub.com, and I'm glad you're here with me. So if you didn't see that video, don't worry. I'll have a card for it down below in the description. But there are basically three main attachment styles, and I've got a lot of videos on my channel about those. There's the secure attachment style, which is where we all want to be, where we don't need another person to feel good emotionally about ourselves. Then there's the anxious attachment style person, which is kind of what I tend to be drawn towards, although I'm working on that. And that is where you kind of cling too tightly. You hold on to people out of a fear of abandonment. You're desperately afraid you're going to get dumped, so you kind of cling too tightly and you're needy and desperate and all those unattractive things. Then the last one is the avoidant attachment style person. And ironically, the avoidant and the anxious both are born out of childhood abandonment wounds. However, the avoidant attachment style person, instead of clinging too tightly, they push everybody away. But there are two subsets of the avoidant attachment style person. Again, the dismissive avoidant and the fearful avoidant. And again, in last week's video, I covered the dismissive avoidant in terms of how to get an ex back, and this one is the fearful avoidant. So what's the difference between those two? The main difference is that the fearful avoidant is desperately afraid of losing their freedom, their sense of identity, and they're worried that if they're in a relationship with you, or frankly in a relationship with anybody, they're going to lose that out of obligation to the other person. And they make their partner controlling or needy, that kind of thing, because they really don't want to lose their freedom. They're desperately afraid of that. Whereas the dismissive avoidant, they kind of do the same thing, but it's more because they block out the emotions. They're almost more detached. It frankly seems like they don't really care about your emotional needs and how their actions affect your emotional needs. So that's a key difference, even though the end result is very similar. But there are some key things that you have to do differently depending upon which bucket your ex falls into. So how do you get a fearful avoidant ex to miss you? That's the first step in wanting them to come back to you, right? So the first step, as with the dismissive avoidant, is you've got to give them time and space to miss you. Because if they dumped you, let's assume in this example that it's an avoidant woman and you're the guy with an anxious attachment style. So the first step, if they dumped you, is you've got to give them enough time and space away from you to where they no longer are painfully petrified of you smothering them, of you controlling them, of you holding on too tightly and restricting their freedom and their individuality. You got to give them enough time and space to where that fear goes away. And then at that point, they'll begin to remember the good times. They'll begin to focus on the good times. And because that fear is no longer clouding their judgment and blocking their heart, they will indeed begin to miss you. But that can take a really long time. How long is that going to take? I'm going to cover that a little bit later in the video. So we know that there are some key differences between attachment styles, right? So by definition, it makes sense that you have to communicate differently with a fearful avoidant attachment style person compared to other people. So how do you communicate with a fearful avoidant ex if you're hoping to get them to come back to you? So the first step is use I instead of you, or even we. Talk about you and your feelings, your actions. Don't blame them. Don't make accusatory statements. Don't say or do things that put them on the defensive. Remember, they have to feel safe, and they have to feel like if they are going to come back to you, that you're not going to return to your old habits. So you've got to make sure their guard is down and stays down. So use I statements, and even asking questions is better than making statements. Hey, real quick before we keep going, if you like this video and you want to see more videos like it, hit that like button for me and subscribe to the channel. It really sends a great signal to YouTube. It shows them the kind of people that my videos are designed to be watched by, and it helps me grow my channel, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. Now, does going no contact work with a fearful avoidant attachment style person? And this kind of addresses what I talked about at the beginning about how long it might take to get them to come back to you. The short answer is yes, going no contact does indeed work to get them back, potentially. It's not foolproof, but it does tend to work, but you've got to give them a lot more time and space away from you where there is no contact from you. And that includes like stalking them on social media, liking or commenting, or even just viewing their Instagram stories, because remember, they can see you on the list of people that watched their story. So you've got to basically pretend they don't exist. With a quote unquote normal person, you might go no contact for anywhere from 30 to 60, maybe even 90 days. With a fearful avoidant attachment style person, you're probably going to need to go 2 to 3 times longer, 6 months, 9 months, maybe even a year. And I know that sucks to hear. I know that hurts, but that's the reality of the situation that you are in if you want them back. But initially, they're not going to be missing you. They're not going to be expressing sadness or regret. They're going to be like, woo, oh my God, finally ditched that needy son of a gun. And they're going to be relishing their newfound freedom. They may be dating other people. They may even be in a new relationship, but don't worry. That doesn't mean that yours can't come back. It's just their way of processing and going through the post-breakup stages. So do fearful avoidants want you to chase them? And initially following a breakup, the answer is absolutely not. Remember, they broke up with you because they felt smothered, they felt controlled, they felt their freedom was stifled. You can't chase them or all of those fears are going to come rushing back. You've got to give them the time and the space away from you to where their fear subsides and they begin to miss you. That being said, they do desperately crave emotional intimacy and connection. It's just that they tend to sabotage themselves and never really get around to actually getting that out of fear of losing their freedom if they give too much away emotionally. Once their fear has subsided, that is when they are going to want you to chase them a little bit. But there's a caveat here. Don't put pressure on them to label your relationship. Don't put pressure on them to be in a relationship. Don't put pressure on them at all. Just connect with them. Go out with them. Do fun things with them. Have sex with them. Don't put a label on what you're doing. Don't put expectations on them. Let them naturally bring it up as they get more and more and more comfortable and as they see that you are different than you used to be. So after a breakup, how do fearful avoidant attachment style people act? What are they doing? And again, I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but initially they're just like, woo! They feel that newfound sense of freedom and they are so glad they left. They're just relishing their freedom. They're relishing being away from you. They're probably greatly exaggerating the things that you were saying and doing in their mind and maybe even to mutual friends about what you were doing and how that was controlling or limiting or stifling. And they're just feeling that sense of relief, frankly. And I know it sucks to hear that. It sucks. You're devastated and it sucks to think that they're out there whipping it up, so happy to be away from you. But that is the reality of the situation that you are dealing with if you were dumped by someone with a fearful avoidant attachment style. By their very nature, of course, they are avoidant for a reason, but they are avoiding those painful emotions. They're not really thinking about the loss. They're not really thinking about the sadness or the grief. They're not really thinking about regret or maybe their own contributions to the breakup. And again, they're probably even greatly exaggerating the bad things that you did so that they can better justify why they left. And unfortunately, they probably are saying those things, which could even be outright lies, to your mutual friends and maybe even family. That's just how this stuff plays out, unfortunately. I know. I just went through this with my ex maybe 2 years ago at this point. So if they're out there elated that they left, does that mean they won't ever regret missing you or leaving you? They will begin to miss you and they will begin to regret the loss of the relationship and the breakup, but only after their fear of being smothered and controlled and losing their freedom, only after the fear of those things has completely gone away. And that's likely going to take at least 6 months or more, depending upon the nature of your relationship, depending upon how anxious you were and how quote unquote controlling and clingy you were and how long the relationship lasted. The more desperate your actions were and the longer you were together, the longer it's likely going to take for them for their fears to subside and go away. And then at that point, they will miss you, they will think back fondly on you, and they may regret the breakup. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to come rushing back to you, but it might if you play your cards right and if you have worked on your own attachment style issues and you are getting yourself to be in a much better place. Now, I mentioned earlier that they might very well be dating other people or jumping into a full-fledged relationship, and often that does happen extremely quickly after a breakup, to where you're like, how the hell are they already in a relationship with somebody else? But that's just the reality of the situation. However, every once in a while, you will find an ex stays single. And in some cases, you're wondering, well, does that mean that they miss me? Does that mean they regret the breakup and they just don't want to say that? Does that mean they want to get back together again with me? And you do have those questions when your ex stays single. So if you want to know why your ex stays single, all the possible reasons, including how to know if they want to come back with you, I want you to watch this video right up here. But for now, I'll see you in the next video.